Welcome to Geeks and Jocks, a podcast that focuses on video games, film, television, and sports. And now, for the person who is in charge of this podcast, here is Ryan Sullivan. Hi, and welcome back to Geeks and Jocks, and I hope you guys have enjoyed your holidays and the start of this new year. And you know what? I am very excited to get 2019 off to a good start with our first episode of the year. So with that, let's talk about the episode at hand, because this has been one that I have had in the back of my pocket for the last month or so, and that is movies I had seen in 2018. And what I mean by that is any movie that I had seen during that whole year, and I hadn't seen one from 20... Here's an example before I get into it. So if I had seen a movie in 2018 that came from 2017, I would be talking about it. And if it was the case, it's the case for when I do another podcast next year for movies that I had seen in 2019, I'll have a few 2018 movies on my list that I have watched in 2019. But with all that aside, let's jump into the first movie that I had seen, and it was all the way into April. So late in the month, I had seen Super Troopers 2, and I would say it is about as equal with the first. Now, I have been a fan of Broken Lizard for a long time. In fact, their alma mater, which is Colgate University, it is an hour from where I live. So that's how close it is to their alma mater. And love Super Troopers, like Beer Fest, like Slammin' Salmon, like Club Dread. Didn't mind their first movie, Puddle Cruiser. And these guys are hilarious. Their characters are quotable and whatnot. And Super Troopers is a prime example of how funny and goofy and quotable and just a memorable movie. Pretty good for an independent movie for Sundance back then. But back to the second one. I had followed their tries to get the movie filmed, like even going back to their, what it was like 3-4 years ago with their Indiegogo campaign. And it was interesting because they got the goal like immediately, like within like 24 hours, if not 48 hours. So what I liked about it is that the problem with most comedy sequels is either they become too similar to the original, or they go in a completely different direction to where people might be turned off by it. And I think Broken Lizard found a very good, healthy balance to it, because there is more than enough original stuff to make it stand out on its own, while at the same time incorporating stuff that are callbacks to the first, like Ramrod, and even having like Larry Johnson, played by Jim Gaffigan, doing the whole meow thing again. But overall, it's very funny. The cast is fantastic. There's not much I can really say that is negative. It's a very fun movie, and you know what? If they make a third one, I think I'll be interested. But that'll be tough, considering a few of them are working on that Tacoma FD show that True TV is making. It should air sometime this year, I think. But anyway, so that was the first movie I saw in 2018, and the next one didn't come until June, and that was when Action Point came out, the Johnny Knoxville movie. Now, I've liked Jackass. I mean, I've liked the movies, and like each one got better and better, which is something you don't really think of with sequels, is that each one gets better and better, and they all are solid. And that was how my thoughts with Jackass. And then there's Bad Grandpa, which I think is pretty good in its own way, where it's parts that are like Jackass, but it's also scripted in a way, and it worked effectively. And the mindset I had with seeing Action Point was that, is this going to be like Jackass in a way? Or is it going to be like Bad Grandpa, to be exact? Is this going to be scripted but have some Jackass type elements to it? And I was pretty disappointed, and I'm not surprised that it flopped really badly this past year, because it is an entirely scripted movie, and it's not it doesn't force things into you with some of the gags and jokes, but you can tell the material just wasn't strong enough, I guess. And I mean, it's a full scripted movie where Knoxville is trying to make his amusement park more exciting and lively and all that, while ignoring the basic rules and stuff of making sure people are okay. And just, I don't know, it was an okay movie, but I think if I were to put my disappointing movies on anything, it was probably one of the most disappointing of 2018 in my opinion, from what I've seen. And just, I don't know, could have been a lot better, but I think people are just tired of the Jackass stuff. I really do. I think it's run its course, and you know what? It had a good run of, all that stuff. Even though it's not labeled as a Jackass movie, it definitely has the elements of Jackass. But yeah, that was Action Point. And then I didn't see another movie for about a week or two, and that was when The Incredibles 2 came out. Now, I've always been a fan of most of Pixar's work, and if you were to ask me my favorite movie of the bunch, it would probably be the first Toy Story. I don't know, just nostalgia, I guess. But anyway, I love the Toy Story movies, Monsters Inc., University. I've liked The Bug's Life. I never minded Cars, the first one at least. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but you know what? Never really minded it. But as far as the first Incredibles movie, I feel like it's very overrated. Like, I don't know what I could really say that can be said without angering people, but I think it goes too overrated by many people. And what I like about the second one is that it feels like a bigger superhero movie without going completely overboard or dragging too long, which I think is one of the great things about it. As the basic plot of the movie is a guy wants to make superheroes legal again, and he wants to use old school superheroes to make his campaign a good point for a bill to be signed, ensuring that superheroes are back in business. But he wants to use Helen Parr, Elastigirl, not Mr. Incredible, Bob. And so it's a kind of movie where it's like, this is more so Elastigirl's movie, though it's not a feminist type of movie or any of that. You give her a chance to shine a bit compared to Mr. Incredible in the first movie. And for Mr. Incredible, Bob, I mean, he has to play the role of like a Mr. Mom in a way, trying to figure things out and just try and make things right for his kids. And actually, the funny thing, the kids get quite a bit of screen time, and they actually use them quite effectively for the movie. And they really do get Jack getting quite a bit. Pretty funny with the amount of superpowers that he has, and just goes completely bonkers at the end of the movie. And to tell you one thing, it actually has a great twist towards the end of the movie. It really does, and you don't really think that for a kids movie, But either way, like, the plot is pretty straightforward. The only disappointing thing that I was not huge on was just lack of Frozone. Just, I don't know. He was such a great character in the first movie. It's a shame they didn't get much screen time of him. But overall, it was just a fantastic movie. I feel much better than the first movie. Now, I'm not hating on the first Incredibles. I think it's a good movie, but way too overrated. Second one, much better. Then after that, another week passed by, and then I went and saw Tag. And this one is pretty intriguing, to say the least, because it is inspired by an actual story about 3 or 4 guys that have played the game of tag for over 20 years. It's inspired by that. And the basic premise is it's 4 or 5 guys that have played the game for over 30 years, and as from when they were kids. And most of them are successful people. They have families, a few of them, and there's one of them that has never been tagged, and he's going to get married. So he is looking to retire for good. And with that, the group of them conspire to make sure he gets tagged for good, ending the game on a good note for them. And it was surprisingly decent. You wouldn't think that way for such a premise. And it's looked at as normal with with the way the characters are. Even like some of the female characters that are with the main characters, it's like they like what they're trying to do. They don't get pissed that, oh, why do you keep doing this? Let's just live a normal life. No, they're not like that. It's like they have like a journalist that is like, I want to hear about this. I like how this works for you friends. And the other one, who is one of the main characters' wives, she is so into it, like it's very exciting. But anyway, no, it's pretty funny. You know, it like all the wacky moments of just trying to get the guy, but the guy that they're trying to tag is just way more smarter and knows what's going to happen. And I probably have butchered the explanation and just my thoughts about the movie, but you know, it's rather hard to explain, especially since I haven't seen it since going to the theater in June. But overall, it's like decent, gets the point across, no filler stuff. I mean, there are some mini side plots, but they're not huge, and they don't waste too much time with those. So overall, a decent movie. I would say borderline good. Now, the next movie I had seen was one I didn't really see any advertisements for, and a shame really, because it's actually very funny, and that is Uncle Drew. Now, Uncle Drew is Kyrie Irving, and it's a guy that was created by Pepsi for commercials way back in like 2012, 2013. And in fact, I think Pepsi produced this movie. The concept for this is there's a guy who is banking on his team to win money in this basketball tournament, and he loses his entire team to a rival and loses his girlfriend. It's like you think it's like the ultimate bad luck movie, but it's far from that. And he sees Uncle Drew trying to show a guy how to play old school, but regardless, the main character is very impressed, and he wants him in the tournament, wants Uncle Drew in the tournament, but he wants his old team back. They actually do give a little background very early in the movie of what the team was like back in the 60s and stuff, and a little rift caused the team to disappear and just live their lives the way they wanted. Now, as far as NBA guys go, they got not just Irving, but Shaquille O'Neal, Reggie Miller, Chris Webber, Nate Robinson, and they actually got a WNBA legend in Lisa Leslie. And it is funny that some of them are just mocking themselves. Like one of the bits is like Reggie Miller is known for his three-point ability, and his scene where he's introduced and just trying to shoot the ball in an arcade is just ridiculous. But it's also one of those movies where you do need to have a tiny bit of knowledge of some basketball. Like one of the bits towards the end is Shaquille O'Neal's character telling Webber not to call a timeout because they don't have any. Call back to Webber's infamous timeout call that resulted in a technical way back in 1993 with the NCAA, either the national championship or the Final Four. I forget. But there is a few parts here and there that might drag a tiny bit, but it's very quick to the point of trying to get themselves set up for the game and just having a love for the sport. And it's like they focus on being funny, and there's no really any like, oh, let's see how good you are at basketball, let's see how good you are at coaching and all that crap. And it focuses on being funny and saving the best for last with the basketball without dragging on and on and on. And just overall, it was a very funny movie. I thought it was well made, and the basketball editing was pretty good, was pretty strong. And this was the next movie I'd seen was actually a documentary film, which is surprising, and that was Won't You Be My Neighbor, the Fred Rogers documentary regarding his show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I saw the trailer of it, when I saw Incredibles 2, and it caught me as a bit of a surprise, because it seemed like it was such an interesting time period for that show, because it came out in 1968, and they really went for it that year. And they covered some tough subjects during that time. watching some of it, such as like Robert Kennedy's assassination, and they were able. It was surprising that they were able to do that way back then, because I think if you were to do that today with anybody getting assassinated, it would not sit well with parents. But it's like, I do believe that Fred Rogers wanted to entertain children, but without needing to go into the realm of Bozo the Clown, Howdy Doody Time, and stuff like that, or even stuff that was hitting TV like Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes, the Flintstones. I really do think he wanted to be really friendly and all that, and it just it's a side of entertainment that you do need a part of that, but at the same time it's like there is also stuff you just want to turn your brain off and just enjoy and have a little bit of fun without needing to be educated all the time. And I know that was the case, like, with all them PSA type stuff in cartoons way back in like the late 80s and early to mid 90s. And you know what? One of the things I looked at is that I feel like Fred Rogers was the true pioneer of having PBS and not Sesame Street or any of that, because he really believed in having content that is good for kids and that they'll learn a thing or two, even if it doesn't feel like an education show. He wanted kids to feel welcomed to watch his show without feeling like they are being educated on stuff that they learn from those episodes. And I mean, they do talk a tiny bit towards the end of the criticism that stemmed from people watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and all that. And it's just, some people have their ideas of what the world is like, and television or no television, people have their view of the world, and they'll believe it in their own opinion anyway they want to view it. So you can't really blame Rogers for people thinking like him just because they watched his show for that long. And I think if he was still alive, I think he would have appreciated it, especially knowing that this past year Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood turned 50, and I don't know, I think we do need a little bit of Mr. Rogers. We do need a little bit of that. Not to say that we don't need mindless entertainment, because we do. But there needs to be a healthy mix. Have shows that are mindless fun, but also have shows that are educated. That's my thought. It was a great documentary, by the way. So the next movie, I didn't really see anything until the start of September, if not the end of August. And this one, I saw trailers of it like months before it, but it was definitely in the back of my mind of something I did want to see, but it was like, I don't really have the time, and it's like, you know what? I'll do it. I'll go see it. And that was Christopher Robin. And my thoughts on that movie is that it was surprisingly great, despite the dark and somber mood that it had. And it starts off kind of cheery with, Christopher Robin as a kid being with all his friends in the 100-acre wood, and then it transitions to where you see parts of his life where it's, I think it's like losing one of his parents and meeting his wife Evelyn and being out in World War II while his daughter and wife are home in London or somewhere in the UK. And you see this movie as at the very beginning of where he now lives life as a businessman, trying to figure out how to make things work, and he has a tough decision to make. And with that, he can't go to his cottage home where the 100-acre wood is, and he tells his wife and daughter to go up there on their own, enjoy it. And he's trying to figure out what to do, and that's when Winnie the Pooh shows up, and Pooh decides to find Christopher Robin in Robin's town, and it becomes an adventure after that. And just some hilarious moments, but also Christopher Robin trying to figure out what is going on. Is this all real again? Is this fake? And he has to convince them that he is the real Christopher Robin, the guy the kid that they used to know now as an adult, and just, he's not the idea of fun. And he's just a guy trying to make ends meet with for his family and all that, and just they do a pretty good job of trying to get the point across of what Christopher Robin is trying to be, but at the same time, I think there is a moral thing about never forget your childhood, because there are those moments in life that you enjoy tremendously when you're a kid, and those memories stick to you forever, and you gotta remember the fun times and all that before you become that adult. And, I think Ewan McGregor does a great job playing Christopher Robin, and playing with all these emotions and stuff like that, and Haley Atwell in her few scenes, she is fantastic as Evelyn, Christopher's wife. And I forget the actress who played the daughter, but her scenes too, I mean, they're great as well, and she is instrumental towards the end of the movie for trying to help her dad out with trying to make that decision on what to do with the business that he's involved in. And the animation on the characters, I'll tell you what, they're actually very good. There's nothing, it doesn't feel like puppets or any of that kind of stuff. It feels very real without feeling like you need to waste everything on special effects and all that. And with that, maybe it does. I've said it with a few other movies in this podcast, but there's probably a few other movies where they drag. It definitely has those parts where it drags, but it's far in between. And overall, it was surprisingly great, and it's one of those few Disney movies that I would probably say, yeah, it's worth probably watching again, probably just to understand a couple things that you might have missed. And after that, I didn't see too many other movies, and the next one I saw was Night School, and that's the Kevin Hart movie, where he plays a high school dropout. And the basic premise for this is he is a successful salesman, despite not having a GED or a high school diploma. He has worked very hard to sell grills, and he thinks it's time to propose to his girlfriend. And he does that, but he finds a way to blow up the business, and a buddy of his tells him he's got a job lined up for him, but he needs to get his GED. And with that, he goes to night school, which he has to deal with a teacher who is trying her hardest to make sure that these guys get to where they are and get that GED, and a principal that, for the most part, they have known each other for a long time, but the principal wants to make sure that Hart doesn't succeed at all, and he wants him to fail and make sure he doesn't get that GED. And it goes from point A to point B rather quickly. It definitely comes off a little slow at the beginning of the movie, but it goes very quick with trying to succeed at doing the schooling, and the characters are very eccentric. They all have, which I think is the case with anything in real life. It's the whole, what's the problem you have with learning, and it's a wide group of characters with their own deficiencies, and even one that goes to prison. Well, there's a prisoner in the film, and one of the scenes that is very funny is he's trying to learn, but he gets in a fight, and he beats up the people trying to beat him up, and he goes back to wanting to learn and all that. Talk about commitment. But overall, it was decent, but I could see why people were not pleased with this movie. It's just I don't know, just maybe it definitely feels a bit, I don't know, mean-spirited a bit, and I don't know, just overall, it was decent, though. Would I recommend it? Probably not. I would say there's probably other better Kevin Hart movies. There's probably a lot more better ones. And after that, there was, and actually, let's see, I saw Night School in early October, so I didn't see anything until early mid-November, and that was when The Grinch came out. And this was a movie that I'd seen with my sister and my niece. Now, my sister was very excited for this movie, and she really wanted to see it, and she thought it was going to come out in 2017, not this past year. But she found out about it like, oh, this comes out next year. She was disappointed because it's like we've seen the 1960 special. It was a great one, and we're probably, I would say, a lot of people that, whether it's family or friends that I know, we're that bunch of people that actually like the live action adaptation with Jim Carrey, which probably would turn off a lot of people, and probably people will turn off on this podcast for that. But anyway, one of the problems with doing a movie adaptation of Dr. Seuss stuff is how do you do that and turn it into a 90-minute movie? And it's a very quick movie, and they portray the Grinch as a guy that does hate Christmas, but he also has to live like a normal person in a way, despite living on the top of Mount Crumpet. So they don't make him out as this very vicious person. He's a lot more tamer than the live-action Grinch, but he gets away with stuff that compared to the 60s version of the Grinch. So, I mean, as far as other characters involved for Whoville, I mean, his dog Max is very, very loyal, and I'd say the Grinch treats him a lot better in this adaptation compared to the special, and even the movie for the most part. Well, actually, you know what? I don't think they were that vicious to the dog in the live-action movie, at least as far as what I know. But, as far as other characters, like, they make Cindy Lou Who into, like, just a kid who wants to have fun, but at the same time she also wants her mother to just feel appreciated because, single mother, trying to raise her and her twin brothers, and, she also wants to find, she also wants to get Santa Claus, and it's just the imagination of these kids that she hangs out with, of trying to get Santa and just to get her wish for her mother to be happy and all that. And it's very hilarious. It's very lighthearted, very, very lighthearted for the most part, and it works in the most effective way. It doesn't need to rely on fart jokes or any of that, and it's surprising. And also a very clean-looking movie visually. Like, it looks beautiful. Wouldn't think that, but it is very, very beautiful. Not really anything in terms of original characters, but they do have a neighbor that is very, very enthusiastic about the holidays, and like, he is probably one of the hilarious parts of the movie, hilarious characters. And with that, I mean, it's a good movie. Like, it goes quick, but it doesn't feel like it's tacked on, which is something you can't say with certain other adaptations. But overall, I mean, it's something I probably would watch again. And, don't be afraid to watch it if you're an adult. So, 2 more movies. The next one I saw actually came opening day when it came out, and that was Creed 2. Now, a few weeks prior, I watched the first Creed on TV. And my thoughts on that movie was that it was good, but nothing revolutionary or anything like that. And it was a lot more grittier, like, unlike any of the Rocky movies. A lot more down to earth, actually, too. Much like Rocky 2, and Rocky Balboa. But this one, my expectations was that it was either going to be a drama like the first Creed, or it was going to go the route of Rocky 4. And thankfully, it went to the former instead of the latter, because it is a very effective drama. And my only complaint really of Creed is that it took forever. This one, not so much. It's very quick to the point. There's more than enough plot to keep you entertained, but at the same time, watch to see what happens with each scene, because the movie is Adonis Creed finally become champion of boxing, and everything's going well. It's like Rocky's there on his side. He, training him and being a good mentor to him. Bianca, being there also on his side, and this love they have for each other and then you got the other side where it's the Dragos. living in the Ukraine, where life ain't been good for Ivan since Rocky IV, where he's been exiled from Russia and he trains his son to be like a real hard-fought fighter. Like, it definitely does come up maybe a little bit like a lab rat type thing, like Ivan was in Rocky IV, but not to the point where he's a test subject, Victor, and he, pumping it up full of steroids and all that, which is, a rather shame thing with that back then. But anyway, they decide to face Adonis, and it's not a one-sided movie, which is surprising. It's not a political movie either, which was really the hot subject at the time. The U.S. and the Soviets, way back when Rocky IV came out, and you understand what the Dragos are going through, and why a match between Victor and Adonis is very important. And in both sides, really. I mean, you see the struggles that each side has. And as far as the boxing goes, it is about as brutal as you can get without going completely over the top. And it's, some of the stuff they have is very gritty, very down to earth and real. Like they don't pull any punches, and they don't. I'm trying to find the right word for this, but it's like they believe in being very real and no bullshit moments. And with that, it's like that's how a sequel should be as far as trying to do a sports drama. And that's it feels like a combination of like Rocky 2, 3, and 4 without being overly ridiculous. And I hope if they do make a Creed 3, they don't go the route like Stallone did with Rocky 3 and 4. Now, I love those movies, but if it's going to go towards that serious route, don't follow Rocky 3 and 4. Keep being like the first two Creeds, the first two Rockies, and Rocky Balboa. That's all I really have to say. Great movie, much better sequel, if you want my opinion. Though the first Creed is pretty good. And the last movie I had seen for 2018 was Ralph Breaks the Internet, Wreck-It Ralph 2. Now, this was a movie I was anticipating, actually, because I saw the first one in the theater when it came out, and it had been delayed a couple times, and came out around Thanksgiving, and it's a good movie, but it definitely falls more in line as a popcorn flick rather than being like a film of its own, because the premise of the movie is Ralph and Vanellope trying to find a wheel for Vanellope's game, and they venture into the world of the internet. Now, it should be a simple enough plot, and it is. And for the most part, following that, it's basically making fun of the internet. But luckily, they don't go overboard with all the internet stuff. They make fun of YouTube. They make fun of, I think, like Twitter and Facebook. They even make fun of Disney themselves. Especially with the scene with the Disney princesses when Vanellope's trying to get away from all the Stormship Troopers. Is that how I said it? Because never really seen Star Wars. But very funny movie. But there's also a bit of story to how things should be for Vanellope and Ralph. Like, there's definitely those like parts where they want to do things their own way, and will that help their friendship in many ways? And there's not really much of a nod to a lot of video games, but they do have some online parts, which is surprisingly a little grim, but also good at the same time. Like, you wouldn't think they would be the bad guys. Well, you would think they would be the bad guys at first, but they're not. They're actually pretty cool people, in the eyes of Vanellope at least. And there's not really much of like a villain type thing until late in the movie, but I think overall it's like they do a great parody of the internet, but the unfortunate side, like I said, it's a popcorn flick, and it's one that you're probably going to forget a little bit, but I would say it would be a must-watch if you're going to watch Wreck-It Ralph and then Wreck-It Ralph 2. But I would say, solid movie. Not as good as the first, but what can you do? It's still a good film. So that should be wrapping up with this podcast. And I've been to the movies already, and there's a few that I want to see. But with that, I should end episode 7 of Geeks and Jocks, movies I had seen in the year of 2018. Hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Maybe talk about some football, some video games, film, and television. Hope to see you guys on the next podcast.